I have this very distinct memory of one day just realizing that I will never get bit by a spider and have Spider-Man powers, and just the incredible disappointment that I felt coming to terms with the fact that that was never actually going to happen.
I don't know if I've realized that yet. So
Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast watching, analyzing, and discussing the collective works of Mike Flanagan. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, holding my hand in the dark, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Scott, that's not my hand.
Oh, no. What does she actually say in the book? I
don't know if she says
remember.
anything.
Yeah, I think there's stuff in her head, which may or may not actually happen. Just like, was I actually holding a hand or not? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows anything in this book.
Yeah, exactly.
This week on the show, our reading of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House continues. We are reading chapters 4 through 6 of the novel. And Matt, we're actually really close to the end. The way I've divided this thing up, we're like 150 pages into a 206-page novel. So our reading next week is going to be pretty quick, but we're almost at the end of this thing. And, well, I got some questions for you.
I think
is the house haunted? Yes or no?
Unclear.
Is she sane? Yes or no?
I go back and forth.
Are they gaslighting her? Yes or no?
Well, yes, they are, but that doesn't mean the house isn't haunted.
I mean, I think this is great, though. This is, I think, the big theme of our episode this week is going to be this, the way the book kind of fascinatingly turns into this idea of Shirley Jackson's almost trying to drive us, the reader, insane a little bit. Because we just have very little to moor us in reality of like what is happening in the house, how much of this is Eleanor, how much of it is the people around Eleanor, how much of it is the house, and we just don't know. And she just doesn't give us any help with that, really. We are kind of just completely lost at sea right now.
When I went over my notes for this week's reading, I just found like I just sound completely paranoid because I'm like, well, this could be this, but it could, but actually, on the other hand, but what if though this character, and it's just like, yeah, and that's the state she's putting us in, which is the state the character I think is in, the point of view character specifically. I went back this week and I listened to our old episode on "We Have Always Lived in the Castle," the Shirley Jackson masterpiece, because I just kept thinking about it while reading this book, and I was like, what did we actually say and think about that? And yeah, there are a lot of Shirley Jackson is doing a lot of similar things in that book where your perspective on things is being very, very tightly controlled and manipulated through the character's point of view. So.
It makes for a really entertaining read. I think it kind of makes for a difficult. I think it's what we're doing is giving ourselves a hard job, and what Shirley Jackson is doing is making our job particularly difficult, because it's very tough for me to sit down right now and tell you definitively what this book is doing. The only thing I know that definitively what the book is doing is it is not allowing us to know definitively what the book is doing. And I think that's all very intentional. And like, look, like we said, we're 50 rough pages from the end, and we don't know at this point if there's ever going to be a moment where the book's going to go, haha, now I will reveal to you exactly what was going on the entire time. Maybe, but it doesn't feel like that's where we're going at this point, right? That doesn't feel like the flavor of the book is actually, let me explain to you, Eleanor, exactly what you've been experiencing over these last 150 pages.
I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Before we did that, though, we just have a couple of quick announcements. We always plug our Patreon at the very end of the show, but I think we've decided we want to let y'all know that we do have a Patreon. That's how we kind of support this whole endeavor that we have. We pay for the equipment and the web hosting and the podcast hosting and everything we do through Patreon. We don't run any ads, as you folks have probably noticed. And so we're just asking if you are enjoying the content and want to help support us, you go check us out on Patreon. Pledge at any of those levels. We have bonus things available there. We have our monthly book club. Patrons get to vote in that. We have our bonus podcasts, one of which we talk about pretty regularly on here is our podcast 2 about the the show From. I thought it was funny when we came up with this name. Little did I realize that it's actually very difficult to explain the joke there, because you can't just say a From podcast because people are like, huh?
What did you say?
No. But we're really enjoying that one. We're about to get to the end of season 1 there. And then, of course, Matt, you have another bonus podcast on there, right?
Yeah, I have a bonus podcast where me and my brother talk about topics ranging from philosophy to science and everything in between. And we have a lot of fun. He was sort of indisposed for a few months, so we took a break from that, but he's healthy again. He's back. And so we have resumed Freeman Bros.
Great. We also occasionally do something we call Doof After Dark on there, which is just supposed to be Matt and I shooting the shit about random stuff. We've recorded several of those that I have not cut together and released, but I'm going to do that soon. TM.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's it's a great community, and I think there's great bonus stuff for you folks there, and yeah, I mean it does help support us, and we really appreciate everyone who does it there. So yeah, if you haven't and are interested in checking that out, patreon.com/doofmedia.
That's right.
Okay, Matt, let's get into it. We begin with chapter 4. Eleanor wakes up the next morning, chastising herself for sleeping in late, and almost immediately starts thinking about, what everyone was saying about her. This is paranoid Eleanor starting to reign here at the beginning of this reading. I love this. What did I do? Did I make a fool of myself? Were they laughing at me? Thinking quickly over the evening before, she could only remember that she must have, seemed foolishly, childishly content, almost happy. Had the others been amused to see that she was so simple? I said silly things, she told herself, and of course they noticed. Today I will be more reserved, less openly grateful to all of them for having me. Then, awakening completely, she shook her head and sighed. You are a very silly baby, Eleanor, she told herself, as she did every morning. I love all this, but it's the as she did every morning that really gets to me. That she wakes her day every morning telling herself that she is a very silly baby.
Yes. The book really has fun manipulating our feelings about Eleanor.
Yes.
I feel like the start of chapter 4 is a very natural break point for the story. I'm kind of glad that we broke the story there, because last week, my feeling about at the end of last week's conversation, my feeling about Eleanor was kind of like, okay, she's kind of socially awkward, but it's understandable given what we know about her and her background and the fact that she was socially isolated. And then by the end of this week's reading, I'm like, holy shit, what is going on with this character? Like, it's almost like there's two Eleanors, and I don't even know how literally I mean that. Like, she's so bimodal in her behavior, where she'll be kind of like charmingly naive, and then there's stuff like this where it's just like paranoid, self-hating, hating everyone else, and she can switch between the two in like a sentence, as you can see here. So it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating because, again, like it kind of forces us to constantly be unsure about how we feel about her and what's going on. I mean, I think one way of framing it is perhaps, she gets this opportunity, she escapes from this life that wasn't making her happy. She gets to kind of, live out that one of those lives that she imagined on her way here. Remember where she sees the statues of the lions and imagines she's always lived in this house the entire time. And she comes to Hill House and kind of gets to do that, where she has this kind of surrogate family of 3 people that she meets, and she's so excited and happy about this whole thing. And so like the first day at Hill House, we get to see, this fear of the house and this fear of change and this fear of the unknown mixed with this general excitement about the possibilities of this thing. And then as she kind of starts to settle into it, the insecurities start to rise up slowly, and the doubts and the self-doubt and just the other people maybe also starting to realize the bits of her that maybe they didn't catch on at first breath. Like we talked about Theo last week and how she seemed kind of immediately taken with Eleanor to the point where we were kind of surprised. And I think we start to see in this week that maybe she's kind of getting tired of Eleanor a little bit too. And not to say like Theo is a perfect character with no flaws of her own, certainly. But she's her insecurities and her things going on are starting to collide with Eleanor's things. And again, we're seeing this from this very close to Eleanor perspective in which Eleanor herself can't see outside of this is about me specifically and my flaws and everything that's wrong with me. And it's really fascinating.
Yeah, you get the sense this would be a completely different book if it were actually from Theodora's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, a perfect example of this is what happens next, right? With Theodora just says, "I'll fill the tub for you," and Eleanor's thought of that is, does she think I wouldn't bathe unless she left a full tub for me? It's like, no, she was being nice, Eleanor. She's just doing a nice thing for you, actually.
Yeah.
But like to Eleanor's point, she like immediately chastises herself for having this opinion, right? This is kind of the push and pull of Eleanor, is she's kind of invaded by these thoughts, these these burdensome thoughts, and then punishes herself for having the thoughts, and then that is this kind of vicious cycle in that she can't seem to escape from.
Yeah, exactly. Her thoughts seem super paranoid and negative here, much more so than they did kind of last week. And it causes me to ask, and this is where I start to sound paranoid, is it the fact that she's been in the house for so long that's kind of the ghostly house is kind of seeping into her and darkening her mood, darkening her perspective, casting a slant on her view of the other characters? Or that's what we're meant to think. And actually, this is just what she's like.
Yeah. And the book provides no answers there.
Yeah.
Intentionally so, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the two of them link up and go searching for the dining room, which is shockingly difficult for them to locate in this confusing maze of a house. I love this detail that the doctor and Luke had left all the doors open for them on the path down the stairs into the dining room, but that the doors, as Eleanor and Theodora approached, just kind of systematically closed on their own as the women got to them, which is very, very spooky.
Yes, it is spooky. I found this very effective and unsettling, frightening. Just the idea of the characters walking into these lightless interior rooms was very unsettling to me. The book is really good at doing this sort of thing where nothing really supernatural is happening here. Like, okay, the doors are closing on their own, but that could still just be someone closed the doors, or the hinges are balanced in a way where they just easily swing shut, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still, I don't know, you can easily put yourself in that perspective of someone who is finding themselves in this situation and see how that would be unsettling.
Yeah, definitely. Don't worry though, Matt. Nobody's afraid. Nobody's afraid of anything.
Yeah, no. They're doing a great job at pretending not to be afraid. Yeah. I had a bird trying to get into my house yesterday because it's like spring, and the birds are. There's this one bird who decided that one of my windows was a trick and that he was definitely going to get through it if he just kept flying against it over and over. And this really creeped me out, and it reminded me of this book because it's like, why does it creep you out that a stupid bird refuses to accept that that's a window that it can't get through? Like, there's nothing. It's actually just funny if you think about it, and or like mildly annoying at worst. But I was like, there's something unsettling about this bird's unnatural behavior in conjugation with my house and its architecture. And it reminded me of like the weirdness of the house in the story, where it's like even something very mundane, like a window, can kind of get a little creepy when you're kind of seeing it in a new light, or you're like something unexpected is happening, and you're just like,
yeah.
I was like really unsettled by this stupid robin or whatever it was.
It's okay. It was probably just a raven.
Yeah, maybe. No, it wasn't a raven. I think it was a robin.
I want to talk about the fear though, and what Eleanor thinks about this fear, because it says Eleanor felt, as she had the day before, that the conversation was being skillfully guided away from the thought of fear, so very present in her own mind. Perhaps she was to be allowed to speak occasionally for all of them, so that, quieting her, they quieted themselves and could leave the subject behind them. Perhaps, vehicle for every kind of fear, she contained enough for all. They are like children, she thought crossly, daring each other to go first, ready to turn and call names at whoever comes last. She pushed her plate away from her and sighed. So my question here is a fun one, of which I know that there is no answer. Is this an accurate depiction of how they're treating Eleanor in your mind?
As you imply, it is impossible to say. I'm going to, call Shirley Jackson's preferred perspective not as close as you would like third person, because you're right that it is a very close third person. It's a close third person that excludes the thoughts and feelings of the other characters and thus makes us feel kind of blind. But also, we're often missing a lot of the thoughts of the character that we kind of want. Because in certain instances, you're not entirely sure what Eleanor really thinks about certain things. I think we'll see maybe a better example of that in a minute here. But this is one of those moments where I was just like, you could take this at face value. You could view it purely as projection, right? You could view 100% of that paragraph you just read about the idea that, the others, they're putting all of their fear on me, but I'm not really afraid. It's like, that's just wishful thinking. That's just projection.
Yeah.
You are afraid and you're blaming them for your fear, but that's just your fear and you're uncomfortable with it. And so you're sort of externalizing it. And you're externalizing it onto them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also very true that like it could be 100% correct that just like everyone's kind of this low level of afraid, but you push your fear onto someone else so you can say to them, like, I think what she's doing here is saying like, oh, someone's like, I'm afraid, but in order to calm my fear down without admitting to anyone that I'm afraid, I'm going to look at you and be like, oh, stop being afraid. You're being silly. I think that's a very common thing people do. I think the interesting thing to me is that Eleanor interprets it as very specifically targeted towards her, which I think maybe a more objective read on this would be that they're all kind of doing it to each other, that they're all kind of trying to not admit that they're all afraid while also simultaneously being afraid. But to Eleanor, it interprets that as, look, they're all looking at me, they're all attacking me. And I just like, by the way, I can't get over those moments that we talked about last week with the random woman that she bumps into on the street, and then the random two people in the cafe that are whispering these things that like, it just a great preview of what we were going to experience in these 3 chapters are these people that she's interacting with that she's convinced are like having some private thought or idea or conversation or joke or trick that involves her, that we don't have access to it. And it's just like, what's happening here is all this is being amplified in Hill House with these 3 characters now.
Yeah. Right. And again, you then ask yourself, like, is it being amplified because of the magical evil house, or is it being amplified because of the interpersonal dynamics and there's no need for magic at all? One note here that I think is important to draw out actually is like, there's always ambiguity to social situations, or even like ambiguity to intentions of why people do or say things. Like, if a person, I'm just trying to draw a picture for myself. So if you're trying to calm someone down, I'm thinking about when I took my kids to see that Jurassic Park thing a few years ago, and this giant animatronic T-Rex comes out, and the children are terrified, and I'm calming the children down, and it's like, Matt, are you just calming yourself down because you're scared? Well, no, I wasn't, because I knew it was an animatronic T-Rex. But maybe on some level, I was afraid that there would be like a stampede of children, and then my children would be trampled. So I'm kind of worried about that. So the reason for this, perhaps what feels like a reach, is like, I was kind of worried, but I was worried about a different thing. And it's not that I was being disingenuous in calling my children down. I was trying to help them, but also there was something else going on.
Yeah.
So like that's just, there's always complexity here, and what Eleanor is doing in her mind is she's like flattening everything into this very us versus them, me versus them mindset of like they're doing this to me, and that, I think that's what makes it kind of paranoid and unsettling feeling.
Yeah. It's really interesting because a bit later in the chapters, like the trio of the other ones will be joking about how Eleanor loves to be the center of attention and is vain. And it seems like they're coming off as like jokes, or just like, oh, silly Eleanor always wanting to be the center of attention, when she's actually this kind of very quiet, mousy type person. But she is essentially like playing as the main character of her life, right? Where everything they do is about her in some way. It's just she takes it in the negative way. It's like it's the attention they're heaping on her is unwanted and cruel. Which is pretty fascinating.
I think also I think she's self-hating to a large degree, and so
yes, yeah.
And so when people direct attention of any kind at her, she like perceives that as a threat or an attack of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just like the Theodora filled up the bath, and she's like, because she thinks I'm an idiot that can't fill up my own bath, and I would only take a bath if someone else filled up the bath for me. Is that what she thinks of me? It's like, I don't think so. I think she just was like, hey, I'll do you this solid.
Yeah, that was the thought that came from inside your head, Eleanor. So
yeah. All right, so they talk about how confusing the house is, and Montague starts to talk to them about how the layout is actually fairly simple when you think about it. And he does this in this way. I don't know if you felt this way, Matt, but like he's like, no, it's actually fairly simple. Like here's the center, and then by the time he's finished with it, I'm like, what? I have no idea actually what you just said. I have no idea.
I definitely started out feeling like, okay, so there's like an exterior perimeter of rooms, and then there's an interior hallway, and then there's an interior set of rooms, and then past that I think I was totally lost, and then eventually it becomes even more confusing because there's like rooms that are at angles that kind of remind me of they're it's not quite Lovecraft where it's like impossible, but it's it's borderline House of Leaves where it's like can't, like kind of uncanny.
So with that, they go on a tour of the house, and it's like it's almost like oppressively bleak and terrible everywhere they go. Even the game room feels ominous to all of them, with its depictions of animals and the giant deer head in the center staring at all of them. It's just like, this is like, I actually love what Theo says about it. It's like, this is where they came to relax and have fun. And it's like, it's bleak and terrible and awful.
Yeah, I remember the description of the animals looking like forlorn and sad. It's great. Yeah.
And then they get to the library, which is actually in the house's tower, hidden right next to the front door. And this, Matt, is when Eleanor refuses to go in, reacting to the smell of the place, which is described as cold air of mold and earth, that the rest of them, by the way, don't seem to notice at all. They don't notice any kind of specific smell while going into this place. And she says something about her mother in this moment that she refuses to go in. So I'll just kind of tee you up there, Matt, and say, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, so first of all, I don't have a lot of firm ideas on what's going on, so I'll just admit that. But, you do start to wonder. One thing I was thinking at this point is like, has Eleanor been entirely honest with us, the reader, about what happened to her mother or with that whole situation? It feels like in retrospect, we're missing a lot of details and granularity on how all of that wound up.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, maybe she has been totally forthright with us. There's no mystery here, but it does leave open the possibility if there is something supernatural happening that her mother's ghost might be here. It is a haunted house after all.
Sure. The rest go in. They didn't seem bothered. And we learn this is most likely where the companion that committed suicide hung herself. So that's cool. What a great house.
Yeah. It's creepy. Still don't actually know if the house did it though. So we'll see.
Kind of like, I don't know. I love libraries, so like the brief glimpse of this library we get to hear about, because Eleanor doesn't go in, seems pretty cool though.
Yeah.
Like a library in a tower. That seems pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stuff about the house where, aside from the fact that it's described as being like incredibly unpleasant to be in, you're kind of like, ooh, that sounds kind of cool. I'd like to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. But now, Matt, it's time for some more confusion because Theodora is like looking at the library tower, and it's like, hey, wait a minute. If this tower is next to the front door, and Eleanor and her rooms overlook the front of the house, then how come they can't see the library tower from the windows of their room? And well, it turns out, Matt, the reason for this is because Hill House is not only evil, but it's just kind of wrong. It was intentionally built wrong by Hugh Crane. We're told everything is slightly off. Angles that are supposed to be sharp right angles are not. Stairs that are supposed to be level are not. The result is a house that just feels confusing, almost one big optical illusion. It is kind of insane, right? That's the first Hill House, which is not sane, as our first description. I do think it's interesting that all of the descriptions of the house up until this point were very much just like, yeah, lines, meat, and bricks, and it was all, physically normal, but just gave off this wrong aura. And now we learn actually that, well, it's built weird.
Yeah. There's something interesting happening as we move on where I don't want to say that this directly literally contradicts what we learned before, but perhaps it does. I wish I remembered more clearly exactly what the text said, because it's like Hugh Crane was just sort of it's just a guy,
Mm-hmm.
kind of a rich guy, built a house, wanted to live there with his family. His wife died tragically, and then what sort of seems like your run of the mill sordid family drama happened.
Yeah.
And but now we're learning, like, no, that he's trying to build the hotel from Ghostbusters, where it's like it's all wrong on purpose, and he has this creepy book that we're about to get into in like 30 seconds, and he's actually a super creepy dude. And I'm like, this is like not what we established originally, and it's very
Yeah.
confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder how much of that is a part of the kind of trying to put you off kilter about everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, I mean, part of the problem with this for me, and again, I think this is very intentional. I know intellectually what they just said there, that no, you see, like, it seems like you're right below the front door, but you're not actually right below the front door. Actually, you're 15 feet away from the front door. Like, I understand that, but I cannot visualize what the fuck they're talking about here whatsoever.
I can't. Yeah, I don't really understand what they mean when they say, like, why can't we see this from the bedroom window? And I'm like, what windows do you have in your house from which you can see other parts of the house?
Well, okay, so there's a great example. Like, I have my front door,
Uh-huh.
and the window that's right behind me faces the front of the house.
Uh-huh.
And in between my front door and the window behind me is a corner of my house where the laundry is.
Right.
And I can see that from this window if I look out this window. And I guess the argument here is, like, if there was a tower there,
Yeah,
I would definitely be able to look out this window behind me and see that corner of my house rising up into the sky into a very tall tower.
Okay.
And if I look out the window and I cannot see that right now, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I mean, like,
Okay.
I'm struggling with it because, like, and I think it's supposed to be, this is, I mean, something that I think we're going to talk about here in just a second. It's like Jackson specifically chooses to not be descriptive in her descriptions of things.
Yeah.
And most of this is done through dialogue, right? Like, it's the actual narrative, like the actual narration of what is happening in any given moment in this book is very sparse. She does not want to draw a picture for you of almost anything.
Yeah, let's get to the next bit, because that's a perfect example.
Yeah, so what I'm talking about here is they continue the tour, which eventually ends up in the drawing room, which one end of the drawing room, we're told, is filled with a giant marble statue, like a huge, imposing marble statue, to the point where Eleanor's like, is that thing going to fall over on us? But the choice that Jackson does here, to tie into what we're talking about here, is we never actually get to see this giant statue. And by that, I mean, the narration never like describes it for us. We don't set the stage. Like what are the figures like? What is it doing? No, the only way we get to witness what the statue is through the descriptions and the dialogue of the other characters, not Eleanor, pointedly, like the one person we get to see in her head, but the other three characters and how they are describing the statue is the only way we have any inclination of what this actually is.
Yeah. Exactly. And thus we get an impression. We don't get an image.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying it so clearly, actually, because after I listened to that part, I was like trying to figure out why I had such a weird, unsettled mental feeling about the statue. Like it worked on me so well that I was like, I don't like the statue. And it's because, as you say, like you don't get to look at the statue.
Yep.
You just get to hear it described secondhand from like 2.5 different people. And it's and they're kind of all like inconsistent explanations, which leaves you even more uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, it's really great because, I mean, they describe it via other art, right? So Dr. Montague describes it as Venus rising from the waves, like that very, very, very famous painting, The Birth of Venus. And then Luke says it's like St. Francis curing the lepers. And then Theo is the one that actually gives us the closest thing to an actual like description of what it is. She says it's a family portrait. And we hear that figure in the center, that tall, undraped, good heavens, masculine one. That's old Hugh patting himself on the back because he built Hill House. And his two attending nymphs are his daughters. That one on the right, who seems to be brandishing an ear of corn, is actually telling about her lawsuit. And the other one, the little one at the end, is the companion. And the one on the other end is Mrs. Dudley done from life, Luke said. So, like, again, that's like, it's dripping with so much sarcasm that we don't actually know. I mean, I think the clearest thing here is that there is a central figure, like in both St. Francis curing the lepers, in The Birth of Venus, and in Theo's description, right? There's a central figure in the middle that's bigger and crowded on each side by other people.
Yeah.
But that's the most we get. Like, let's just say again, the Venus rising from the waves and St. Francis curing a leper don't look like each other.
Yeah.
Right. Like, those are not, like, in composition, those are not similar compositions, other than the fact there's one big, larger figure in the center of these things. Like, there's a fucking shell in Venus rising from the waves.
Yeah.
It's a very distinct seashell is there.
Yeah, they're very tonally different. Sculptures, and then also, as you say, no sort of like background elements or props are described, and maybe there are none. Maybe it's just like the human figures, but we don't really get to see what they're wearing, what expressions are on their faces. Actually, that was one thing that definitely bugged me. Is it's like, are these worshipful expressions? Are the and so you project something onto their faces. Sternness, what is it? I don't know. It's uncomfortable not to see it.
And this is one of those things, like, to kind of preface our conversation on the television show that we will get to. This is one of those things where you start asking yourself the question of, like, okay, well, how do you do this in a visual medium then? Mm-hmm. Like, if the whole point of this sequence is that Shirley Jackson is withholding from you what this thing actually looks like, how do you make that function? Can you even make that function?
Right. Another thing, and as you say, I'll find out next week regardless, but like I keep thinking stuff like the statues, like, does this matter? Like, is the statue flavor? Is it just like it's another creepy thing that's in the house?
Sure.
That's just meant to make you feel unsettled? Or is it like, no, the secret to everything is in the statue? And I have no idea at this point. Like, I still can't tell I guess, and that makes me even more uncertain, I guess. So
yeah, I mean, like, how much of this book is just mood, right? Like that it very well could be that a large portion of this book is just to set a certain mood and tone and feel for you. And yeah, none of this quote unquote matters.
Right.
I just want to point out again that Eleanor offers no description of what this thing looks like at all. She's just concerned that with the house the way it is, the unleveled house the way it is, that could this thing fall on them? Maybe.
Yeah.
And Monty's like, no, not. It couldn't possibly.
Of course not. It's totally going to fall on them.
All right, so they make their way out onto the veranda and eventually to the kitchen where Mrs. Dudley just continues to be Mrs. Dudley. I want to say here, like, this is a very eerie, uncomfortable, creepy book. It's very funny too, though. Like, there's moments of actual genuine humor, and I think Mrs. Dudley is at the middle of most of them.
Yeah.
And like, she just continues to be absolutely delightful, and I love her. Of just like, she only says the same things over and over again. I'm jumping ahead, but I love when they're just like, she comes up, I clear the plates at 10. It's like, yes, that's fine. Just give us 15 more minutes. I clear the plates at 10.
Yeah. I mean, you're right that it's funny, but it's funny in an uncomfortable way to me anyway. Like my interpretation of a lot of this is like the characters are unsettled by her weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
And but the way that they're going to cope with this is they're going to be like, get a load of her. Yeah. Like isn't this hilarious how weird she is? But that is essentially them metabolizing their own fear. That's one undertone to a lot of what happens in this book that could have mentioned at various times in this conversation, but now is as good a time as any, is that all the characters are obviously afraid or worried or whatever at different points, and they're just like dealing with it through different coping mechanisms at different times. Or be it maybe like Eleanor said, like sort of projecting it onto someone else and then saying, don't be scared, but really it's them who's scared. Or maybe they're using humor or irony or sarcasm, or just like that's an element that keeps cropping up in different ways.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, absolutely right, for sure. One thing I wanted to point out in the scene as well is this idea, this kind of recurring bit that we see Theo do multiple times throughout this week's reading, is she like, Eleanor will mention something like in here while she's sitting there observing the kitchen. Eleanor's like, oh, this isn't at all like the kitchen at my mother's house. Like, that was small and cramped and dark. And Theo, like, almost very pointedly, or at least in my read of it, very pointedly is like, oh, but what about the kitchen in your new apartment? Isn't that one lovely? And she does this multiple times where she keeps asking about this new apartment that we know is bullshit and doesn't exist. And of course, it's almost like a 3-beat this week, because the last time she says it is like, what about your apartment with your cup of stars? Like, It's just like, she knows. Yeah. She totally knows. Like, that's a fair read, right? That Theo just knows this is kind of BS.
I literally can't see how it could be otherwise. Like, it would just be very... So if it were just the case that Theo is not psychic, then all of that would be super confusing, because she does so many obviously psychic things, especially when it comes to Eleanor and reading Eleanor's thoughts and things that we know Eleanor has lied about, and then her bringing them up later. I think you're totally just correct about this.
Yeah. So they go back out onto the veranda, and Eleanor, does what a person does, hang off the veranda so far that she almost falls while looking up at the tower, as you do.
Yeah, right.
It is very, like, again, I don't want to be too tough on Eleanor here, but like, it is also kind of fun to play the game of what must this look like from the exterior perspective, and just like wondering as the other characters like do kind of start to pay more attention to Eleanor, and is that because of Eleanor's paranoia and we're just feeling that, or is it accurate and it's just reflecting off of their growing concern for her? as she behaves more and more erratically. And we don't get a clear answer to that at all.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so when they get back in the house, Matt, all the doors and windows that they've opened over the course of their tour are shut up again, which is it's just Mrs. Dudley, right?
Sure.
I do like that we got the bit that Mrs. Dudley did, like, move the pot that was keeping the front door open.
Uh-huh.
So, like, it's almost like a perfect way out for them of just like, oh yeah, that was definitely Mrs. Dudley. It was for sure. Yeah, totally. Uh-huh.
Right. Although from our perspective, it's like maybe Miss Dudley moved the pot because she didn't want the house to break the pot when it inevitably forced the door closed with its evil magic.
Yeah. So they eat lunch, and then Eleanor and Theodora go hang out in Theo's green room. Eventually, Theo paints Eleanor's toes red while mentioning how dirty her feet are. And I love this so much, Matt. Eleanor says the polish on her toes is dirty and wicked and kind of freaks out about it. And Matt, this is so fun because there's a read here where these are just like two girls hanging out, painting toes, which I think that's just what women do when they hang out with each other, right? Like,
as far as I know.
Yeah, just guessing. Yeah. And Theo makes what she thinks is like a harmless comment and jest of like, "Oh, your feet are dirty." And then Eleanor is like, "Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god, my feet are and it's so wicked." And then Theo's just like, "Jesus Christ, this girl, holy crap." But there's also a read here that Theo sucks. And it just decided to be like, your feet are dirty. Gross. And it's just like, that's fucked up. Thanks, man. Thanks for the help there.
And both are possible, right? Because like you can totally see Theo does have this cruel streak in her, I think.
Yeah.
She knows what to say to really get to Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's true. But also, Eleanor seems super oversensitive. So it could have just been innocuous. Like I can totally imagine like painting my daughter's toenails, a thing that I have done, and being like, "Yeah, your feet are dirty," and like that just like being a playful remark, and the kid would take it in that spirit, and it would all be totally fine. But like that's a situation with a certain context, and here the problem is like the context is ambiguous. That's the topic sentence of today's presentation. Is the context is ambiguous in all of these interactions. Everything can be taken as either Theo's being horrible, or it was a totally innocuous comment that sent Eleanor off the edge because she's hypersensitive.
Yeah. And which is it? I mean, I love this, right? I love that we don't get the answer because it does create this feeling of paranoia, as you said. Yeah. And this feeling of like we're constantly asking the question of like, okay, what am I supposed to like? You just look at that scene, and as someone analyzing a book, you're just like, okay, every scene in a book has purpose. What was the purpose of that scene? It's like,
yeah,
I don't know, and that's the answer. That's the answer is I don't know. The answer is maybe Theo is being awful. Maybe Eleanor is being paranoid. Maybe a little bit of both, actually. Yeah. Maybe Theo was originally drawn to Eleanor at the beginning, and then she started to get on her nerves. Or maybe that's all in Eleanor's head, and none of the animosity that she's feeling toward Theo a little bit like is actually being reciprocated, actually being given to like.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Yeah. That's what's delightful. I mean, you see why people fall in love with these Shirley Jackson stories, because you can debate them, and they're sort of a mirror, right? Where it's like, well, I think Theo's awful. I hate Theo, and it's like, okay, well, what are you bringing to this book then that causes you to project that into the book onto the character, right?
Yeah. And there's a part of me that has this read, and maybe this is not quite the right place to talk about it, but we can circle back around to it. There's a part of me that has this read that it's like Eleanor in coming to this house is desperately trying to grasp on to some sense of like a normal life, right? Like again, like she's had this very sheltered life where she's lived with her mom and taken care of her mom her entire adult life. And now she's got this opportunity and she's so excited about it. And she's so excited about being normal. And like she creates almost like a surrogate family for herself in these people. Like you can almost imagine like Montague could be like the father, Luke maybe the brother, or even the love interest, as we'll see in a couple chapters. Maybe Theo serves as like a sister figure for her. And she creates this very traditional, normal family and this happy life. And what's happening is she's actually bucking against it because she's very different. She doesn't fit into that perfect slot, that perfect picture, that perfect idea. She is different. Maybe like the house is different. And so like it's a square peg round hole kind of situation. And so maybe all this feeling is just this idea that Shirley Jackson is writing about, like this pressure that people, especially women, are under to fit into a form that we're supposed to fit into, and she's pushing up against that. I think we'll revisit this again when we have her desperately trying to flirt with Luke moment that ends terribly for her. But I keep thinking about this idea.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting.
All right, so later, they kind of continue their tour, and they realize as they walk past the threshold into the nursery, that they feel a very specific cold. This is described to us as not being just a mere like temperature drop that you can sometimes experience in houses, but like a significant drop in temperature, the point where later when Montague is trying to measure the cold space out and study it scientifically, Luke can't even hold his hand in there to hold the tape measure for more than a few moments before it just gets too cold to handle. So this is like, it's perhaps literally below freezing in this one random threshold here. And again, these are phenomenon that they all feel, right? I think this is important to say. It's like there are moments in this book where we question is this something happening to Eleanor specifically that none of them are noticing? But there are also moments that it's very clearly things that are shared supernatural events. And this is one that they all feel. But Eleanor makes this like more acute and personal, like saying that this feels deliberate and targeted towards her specifically.
Sure, Eleanor. Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of kind of the weird off-kilterness of the paranormal things that we've witnessed up to this point, because like it is paranormal, but it's also the sort of thing that I personally would probably roll my eyes over if somebody told me that they experienced this. Where like it's like, okay, so I wager that if I had some guests at my house and I was like, y'all want to know something? I've got this one corner in my basement where it's a full 15 degrees colder than the whole rest of the basement. You stick your hand in there, you'll feel it. And I bet that most people who stick their hand in there, if I sold it, if I was a good actor, they would claim that they felt it, because people are suggestible. And I include myself in people, by the way. I would totally fall for this. And then later I would tell myself that it was just the power of suggestion. It wasn't magic. But like, it's a subtle little thing that you can write off is the point of me bringing, like it's a cold spot. Like it's not it's not a full torso apparition. Like I said last week, it's a cold spot. It's something you can write off. It kind of reminds me of in the film Poltergeist, when the scientists are like obsessing over like, look at these readings, and like there's things flying around in circles around them, and it's like, just look with your eyes at what's happening. It's like there's a funny obsession with like the sort of minutia that you can measure versus the like more unexplainable stuff that you can't measure, and thus it kind of can't be quantified, and so it gets disregarded maybe. I don't know.
No, I like that. I mean, I think to kind of circle, Montague again later tries to actually measure the cold change and can't find anything on his instruments that showed that the temperature is changing, which I think is very intentional. And I do think it comes back to a comment he has about fear that we're going to get to a little bit later, and how we are susceptible to fear and to the unexplained. I mean, because I do think Montague's kind of flaw, if we look at him as a character, which I think it is interesting that we got these three characters that at the very beginning of the book spent some time defining them and drawing them as characters in this book. And then we jumped in Eleanor's head and have never left it, really. And therefore we just get a very limited kind of view into who these people actually are. We kind of have to see around the edges of that. And it does seem like Montague is the type of person that's just like really obsessed with scientifically proving that this kind of stuff exists. When, yeah, to your point, it's like, there's like, it's fucking crazy shit's happening here, man. Like, whether you can scientifically prove it or not is almost irrelevant. And perhaps it is why the things are happening to him differently than they're happening to some of the others.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point because everyone does get different things are happening to different people. Certainly, that's true. Yeah. We still don't really know what he experienced when last week when he was like, oh, just my imagination. Which I love that we don't find out what it was, because it just leaves us to have to imagine something terrible that he saw.
Yeah. I think one more note about the nursery that I'll just mention here is that it's similar to the other rooms in the house in that despite having the trappings of like a normal happy place, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel happy. It feels dark and foreboding. I think the difference here, though, that we learn is that this room has a feeling of neglect to it. I think what the text actually says through Eleanor is that that while Mrs. Dudley actively takes care of the house, this is not a room she does, that as if she doesn't want to cross the cold barrier at all to go into this room. So she's kind of allowing this room to be neglected, which again, we don't know what to do with here, but interesting.
Yeah, possibly that's just the explanation. Yeah.
And then we get this, Matt, which we have to spend some time on this. This is later that night at dinner. I am going to get fat and lazy in Hill House, Theodora went on. Her insistence on naming Hill House troubled Eleanor. It's as though she was saying it deliberately, Eleanor thought, telling the house she knows its name, calling the house to tell it where we are. Is it bravado? Hill House, Hill House, Hill House, Theodora said softly and smiled across at Eleanor. So, okay. The clearest indication in the book so far that Theodora is just reading Eleanor's mind, right? Like, this is just, like, there are many things in this book that we could say, well, what does this mean? How can we interpret this? We're not sure. This is just Eleanor is thinking something about Theo, and then Theo responds to her thoughts.
Yeah.
And so that's it. So we have to assume now that everything Eleanor thinks, maybe not everything, but a lot of what Eleanor thinks, maybe especially about Theo, is stuff that Theo is picking up on, right?
Yeah. I mean, like a few minutes ago, we were talking about the fact that Theo is trolling her by mentioning the things that she knows she's lying about. It's like a moment like this one, Eleanor also doesn't really react to this, right? So, so we don't know. The question in my mind isn't so much like, is Eleanor is Theo reading her mind? For me, the answer is yes. The question is Eleanor aware that Theo is reading her mind? And if not, how is she missing out on something that seems to us relatively obvious?
Yeah.
Almost to the extent that Theodora is rubbing our face in it.
Yeah.
Because like at this point, I'm just like, again, if we later find out that Theo is not actually reading her mind, then I'll just be like, what the hell then? that nothing makes sense now. So
I also think it's really interesting that like every character calls it Hill House at various points in the story. She just decided that she was going to be mad at Theo in this one instance for referring to it as Hill House.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a note. I can't remember if it's Montague or Luke. There's a note where they just call, I think when she's talking to the doctor later and he just says this house instead of Hill House. And she's like, yes, he's not calling it Hill House, but he has before and he will again. And it's just like, this is just a very specific kind of out of the blue complaint that she has that I think has more to do with Eleanor's feelings on Theo than it has to do with anything about how Theo is using the name of the house.
Totally.
So at the end of dinner, Luke and Theo joke about their made-up characters from the day before, something Eleanor was game on doing yesterday. but seems much more uneasy about doing this now. The doctor kind of walks over to her and chats to her. She says she's waiting for something to happen, and the doctor here makes her promise that if the house begins to catch you, he says, Eleanor will leave right away. We'll get out of there.
Which is great because it puts us even further into the position of asking, like, well, Eleanor certainly is acting weird. So does that mean that the house is catching Eleanor? Is that what we are witnessing, or is it just as simple as Eleanor is kind of an odd duck and she is in an odd situation, and things are playing out naturally? Mm-hmm. And I'm still open to this idea that, like, the fun thing about, like, the horror genre, right, is that you take something that is real and human and mundane, and you amplify it and exaggerate it in order to say something about it. And, like, maybe this is all the same thing. Like, the idea that you go to this isolated house that everyone thinks of as the crazy house that makes you crazy, and then you go crazy. Nothing magic happened there. It was a combination of social pressure and a weird situation and whatever latent issues you had going on being exacerbated by that, and things could go very badly. Like, I guess we have very little of this book left, but, like, I expect things to go very badly. I expect this to have a grotesque ending of some kind of horrible thing is going to happen. Okay. And likely it will be something that Eleanor does. That just feels like the kind of story that this is. And even then, my prediction, I haven't seen the TV show, so I get to make predictions, is like, Eleanor's going to do something awful, and it's going to still be ambiguous, even at the very end. Like, did Hill House make her do this? Or is this just who Eleanor is? Or, again, like, both of those things at the same time, because that is the nature of madness and of Hill House.
Sure. I love it. We'll see.
We'll see.
So this evening, the doctor beats Luke at chess this time, and Theo gets whiny again. Does she? Does she get whiny again? Or is she just sleepy?
Or maybe she's just a little bit whiny in a way that if you liked her, you would find endearing. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't like her, you would find incredibly grating.
Yeah. Yeah. So later that night, Eleanor wakes up to telling her mother that she's coming. This is something that happens, a recurring beat in the story, that Eleanor wakes up rushing to her mother's aid, as if this was like her normal waking up process, is her mother waking her up in the middle of the night and she needs to go help her. But she quickly remembers she's in Hill House. She rushes over to Theo's room, who is freaking out, and the two of them sit in her bed as something is knocking on all the doors of Hill House. This scene is one of the ones that gets me from a scare perspective. Like, I think this is really, really effective horror of just, like, the terror of something is going from door to door down the hallway their bedroom is, and slamming against the door. I can't help but get a little goosebumpy here. And I love this writing in particular. It started again, as though it had been listening, waiting to hear their voices and what they said, to identify them, to know how well prepared they were against it, waiting to hear if they were afraid. So suddenly that Eleanor leapt back against the bed, and Theodora gasped and cried out. The iron crash came again at the door, and both of them lifted their eyes in horror, because the hammering was against the upper edge of the door, higher than either of them could reach, higher than Luke or the doctor could reach, and the sickening, degrading cold came in waves from whatever was outside the door. Ugh, that's so good. I love just like one of those beats that really gets me is the realization that it can't be someone knocking on the door because it's too tall. Like, I love that. I love that so much.
Right. Yes, I agree. It's incredibly unsettling and frightening. This is definitely the scariest part of the book so far to me.
Yeah.
Out of everything we've read, I still don't know. I'm trying not to repeat myself, but it's like, or I guess this isn't really repetition, because this is a new evolution as we reach a point where I really started having some double think, where I was like, okay, cool, finally some ghosts. This is This is scary. This is good. And then like almost right after the scene, when Luke and the doctor show up, I was like, Luke and the doctor could have been doing this. And it's like, but by telling me that, oh, there's no way Luke and the doctor could have done this because it was too high up, I'm like, stools exist.
Yeah, yeah.
You could stand on, or you could have a long stick that you're banging against the top of the door. All of it can be explained because I don't see anything. The cold, like the waves of cold coming off the door, that's a little harder to explain. But broadly speaking, it's like, well, if you're terrified, you're going to feel cold.
Yeah.
So like it could all be a prank. It could all be gaslighting. It's possible. Is it likely? I don't know. I don't know what way I feel about it, and that is, again, for the nth time, that's what's like grinding on me as I read it. It's just like I can't tell which way I'm supposed to feel about this.
I love this because I think you're grasping onto kind of exactly what Shirley Jackson wanted to do with this sequence, which is that you're reading a book that you kind of know is a horror novel, is a haunted house novel, and you are kind of waiting for that definitive moment of, yes, there are ghosts, yes, this place is haunted, yes, there is a presence here, and you feel like you're getting it here. You feel like, oh yes, this is it at last. But yeah, Jackson has so cleverly constructed this scene to where any assurance at what was occurring here is given away from you, because like Luke and the doctor's explanation for what happened is kind of hilarious, right? Because they're just like, yeah, we like a dog ran by my room, and so I got Luke and we went to go look for the dog. And so that's what we were doing. We were just outside looking for the dog, and we didn't hear you guys at all. Like, we didn't hear any screaming or yelling or banging. We heard nothing. And then we came up the stairs, and it was just, I guess we must have scared it away. And it's just like, you sons of bitches. Yeah. And this is all intentional construction. Like, it doesn't, the book refuses to give you what you want here.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah, I think you're right. And decidedly not making us think like, it was definitely a prank. Because, I mean, partly you're just like, well, why would they? Why would they do that? Like, that's the biggest argument against this being gaslighting is I'm just like, I don't understand why the doctor and Luke would do that.
Yeah.
In the first place.
What would be gained from it?
Yeah.
If like, it doesn't make sense for what the doctor, because the doctor seems to be here to just to study supernatural paranormal activity, right? And creating it himself would not help him study that at all.
Right.
Yeah, Luke, I mean, we know Luke is like a liar and a cheat, but like not in that kind of way. It really would not make specific sense why he and the doctor would team up to do that. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it would also really be mean to Theo as well. Like, Eleanor, of course, would assume it was just about her specifically, but yeah, we just don't know.
Exactly.
So our chapter ends with the doctor commenting that it seems like whatever walks in Hill House seems intent on separating the group from each other. That's his interpretation of random ghost dog chasing him outside.
Yeah, which is a weird scientific explanation when they still were in two groups of two when this happened.
Yeah. All right, chapter 5. The next morning, Eleanor begins with some words of affirmation. It is my second morning in Hill House, and I am unbelievably happy. Journey's end and lovers' meeting. I have spent all but sleepless night. I have told lies and made a fool of myself, and the very air tastes like wine. I have been frightened half out of my foolish wits, but I have somehow earned this joy. I have been waiting for it for so long, abandoning a lifelong belief that to name happiness is to dissipate it. She smiled at herself in the mirror and told herself silently, "You are happy, Eleanor. You have finally been given a part of your measure of happiness." Looking away from her own face in the mirror, she thought blindly, "Journey's end in lovers' meeting. Lovers' meeting." I love this. I want to like take a step back here and be like, we're picking up on vibes around Eleanor that she's maybe kind of not fully sane, a little unhinged, rubbing the people the wrong way. I still deeply care for her as a character, and I think that's very important. Like, again, to go back to what you said at the beginning of the episode, this is a woman who has lived an incredibly sheltered life that is getting to experience some sort of adventure for the first time ever. And she's so happy and excited about it. And maybe some of that excitement is translating to over eagerness, like kind of maybe an over obsession with Theo to the point that it's rubbing Theo the wrong way. And it's heightening all her emotions to the point where she's overreacting to everything and people are starting to get uncomfortable by it. But like the core of that is just this poor girl who has never gotten to experience anything in her entire life finally getting stuff.
Yeah.
And I think this matters. Like, I love that Jackson kind of continually centers us with Eleanor again a little bit.
I agree. If you've never really gotten to hang out with people and you finally get to hang out with people sort of for the first time, the stakes are really high for you that these people like you. And so yeah, you're going to overreact if you feel like the vibe is off, or maybe they don't like you, or maybe you said the wrong thing. It's totally understandable. Yeah. Even stuff like this that seems a little manic. I don't know if this resonated with you at all, but it resonated with me, especially younger me. Like when I was a teenager, I would fixate on weird little phrases that I found to be meaningful for whatever reason, and I'd kind of treat them in this sort of talismanic way that Eleanor does in her internal monologue, thinking about Journey's End and Lovers Meeting. This quirk of hers was very familiar to young Matt. I probably still do this to some degree, where there's just like little snippets of phrases that I'll just pop into my head at different times, and I don't know. The fact that it happens to this character and happens to me means, therefore, it's normal and everyone does it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have the specific phrases like that, but I can totally understand this need to center and like reaffirm yourself for sure. I mean, like the part that does really speak to me is the kind of the over eagerness and over excitement at certain things. I was actually thinking about this after I read this passage, and I didn't even think about why it was popping into my head until just now. Like I read this week's reading, and then I had this thought, this memory. You know, like sometimes your brain just deposits embarrassing memories for you in your brain. It's just really great at that. I love it so much. And I didn't even connect that this was that it was related to this book until this conversation right now. But I was thinking about like one of the first serious girlfriends I had, and the over eagerness with which I approached that relationship with someone that was much more experienced to me in the romance department than me in the romance department. And just like this, I look back on it now with the things I said and the things I did and like the extreme embarrassment I have of those moments. But it came from this place of just genuine excitement and eagerness towards, oh, I finally have like a girlfriend, and I'm just so excited about it actually. And she's great, and I'm loving all of this. And yeah. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Right. Yeah. There's something super relatable. In fact, I would say that when we're like critical of Eleanor, it's sort of it's out of the discomfort of relating to being that way. You know, I think, I don't know. I don't want to say everyone is like this when they're young, but I feel like everyone has a phase of awkwardness and not quite being socially calibrated yet, and making, being a little tone deaf to the situation. And when you're young and inexperienced, like you really care if people like you. It takes a long time to get to the point when you can really just let something slide, to have the confidence in yourself to just be like, yeah, whatever. Like, and that is just so far from where Eleanor is, and it's painful to watch, but also, yes, relatable, as you say.
Yep. And then Eleanor immediately lies about her age to make her older.
Yeah.
She says out loud, I am 34 years old. And I Shirley Jackson, you're amazing. Like this sentence, what obscure defiance made her add 2 years? I love that so much.
Yeah. I think it's just generally that she wants to be taken more seriously, and she's feeling very childish. Is my answer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny because she's 32, but to your point, I think because of her situation and because of how sheltered she was, her maturity level is much lower than that. And so this desire to age yourself up even more to allow people to see you as older, I think makes total sense.
Yeah.
So we see that despite the events of the previous night, or perhaps because of them, everyone in Hill House is pretty excited this morning. A fact that the doctor actually seems a bit nervous about, saying that maybe the atmosphere of Hill House is starting to affect them. It's enchanting them a little bit. I love that. I love how much energy everyone has and excitement.
Yeah. It is really, I one little note I wanted to point out is like the previous morning when she woke up, she was super paranoid and almost depressive and negative. And this morning she wakes up and she's almost manic. She's saying her little aphorisms to herself. And it does feel like there's a seesaw sort of contrast there. So maybe there is something that the professor is picking up on, but I don't know.
Yeah. And I think the thing that they note here, Matt, is that, okay, there was all this stuff that happened last night, but it's not like dangerous, right, Matt? The ghosts, for all their knocking and banging and creepiness, didn't actually hurt anyone. But the doctor has thoughts on this too.
Yeah, it seems like the house never directly hurts anybody, even in the stories that we've heard from the past, but it does drive people to hurt themselves, which is kind of more the direction I see things going.
Sure. I love what the doctor says here, though. He says, the menace of the supernatural is that it attacks where modern minds are weakest, where we have abandoned our protective armor of superstition and have no substitute defense. Not one of us thinks rationally that what ran through the garden last night was a ghost, and what knocked on the door was a ghost. And yet there was certainly something going on in Hill House last night, and the mind's instinctive refuse, self-doubt, is eliminated. I love this. Like, essentially what the doctor is saying here is that if you open yourself up to the possibility that like ghosts exist and like spirits and demons and things exist, when you experience something like this, you can immediately file it away into, oh yeah, it's probably like a spirit or a ghost or something. But when you live in a world of extreme rationality where like I think you and I do, or we don't. I do not think ghosts are a real thing. I do not think that they are. And you experience something like this, that has a much bigger effect on you, because it's not just you saw something spooky. It's you saw something spooky that challenges your understanding of how the universe functions.
Right.
Actually,
I have to have a little crisis now. It's not just the fact of the ghosts; it's the fact of, oh my god, ghosts exist.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, that interestingly, one way of saying it is just like ghosts are way scarier to people who don't believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
Like if you believe in ghosts, then to you, a ghost is a thing that you can grapple with.
Yeah.
So
my counterpoint to that would be, I don't understand how people that do believe in ghosts function. If you believe there are spooky spirits of dead people just fucking hanging around all the time, how do you exist in this world?
I don't. Yeah. So like, if you do the exercise of taking seriously the idea of ghosts, it's like, why did they do the things that they do becomes, to me, the interesting question. Like if you try to apply rationality to the question of ghosts, it's like, okay, ghost is just a word. Like, what is it exactly? Why does it do what it does? Where does it come from? What are the rules? There has to be some kind of rules. But that's because we love making rules. Like we love I think the answer to your question of like, how is it not terrifying is like, well, what you do if you believe in ghosts is you kind of have your set of rules that you have in your head for how ghosts operate. And then a ghost is like a bear, where it's like, you keep the food sealed away so they can't smell the food, and you make yourself big and yell when you see the bear. It's like, yeah, there's the ghosts follow rules, and so it's not terrifying for the same reason I'm not scared of a bear right now, is that I don't expect the bear to show up here, and if I encountered a bear, I would have a plan. Like so you bring it into the realm of something you can deal with.
It's all well and good, Matt, but what about a ghost bear?
I have no plan to deal with a ghost bear.
We're fucked. I like that though. Ghosts are just bears.
Ghosts
Matt
are
Freeman,
kind of
2025.
they're a kind of bear, really, if you think about it.
Yeah. I agree. No, I mean I think you're just right there, obviously. Like
cool.
We function in our everyday life because we have to. There's also 70 million things that could kill us at any moment, and that we don't let that take over our entire lives.
This is true.
All right, so breakfast over, they plot out their day. The doctor, he's a scientist, man. He's got work to do, and all these freaking kids just want to run around and play all day. But first, they must get another round of coffee, and Luke is nominated to be the one to go ask scary Mrs. Dudley for some more coffee. I wanted to point out this and talk about this for a sec, because he says, "I beg of you, you're all contemplating asking the old fool for something. Send Theo or our charming Nell. They are not afraid." And the reason I picked this, because I wanted to talk to you about Nell. Something that I'd never picked up on before reading this book. I knew Eleanor was called Nell from the movies I've watched, from The Haunting of Hill House by Mr. Flanagan. But in this book, Eleanor has never introduced herself as Nell, has never told people she's called Nell, has never said she likes being called Nell. None of that has ever happened. What did happen, though, is the night of the ghost attack, Theodora says, Nellie here was going to scream. That's the first time in the book she's referred to as Nell. When Theodora says, Nellie here is going to scream. And then suddenly, the next morning, and throughout the rest of these chapters we read, by the way, people are just calling her Nell. And of course, Eleanor, being Eleanor, doesn't ever say anything about this. We don't even hear her in her mind react to this, but it definitely happens.
Yeah. Right. It is really interesting. I agree. I love it. And I love, once again, that it is completely ambiguous, because you could view this as like an exertion of social power by Theo, by saying, I get to decide what you're called now because I am the powerful one here and I control everything and everyone. Or could just be that they're all kind of fond of her.
Yeah.
So they're calling her by the diminutive form of her name because they all care for her, and she's just there's the sweet little Nell who they like to have around because she's so pleasant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's also something to be said for the idea that it is a diminutive, meaning maybe they are seeing her as more of a child, thinking of her as more of a child, and thus calling her by a childish nickname. Yep. That's possible. It's not necessarily malicious. It's not like they're making fun of her. It's just that's kind of how she projects herself, honestly. So sure. Can't really blame them. It also connects nicely with the idea from a few minutes ago of how she said that she was older than she is, because maybe she detects this thing where it's like she doesn't want to be thought to be a child. My most galaxy brain thought here is that the little girls were in the house before, and the ghosts that they hear are like giggling ghosts and childish crying voice ghosts. And I'm just wondering if if we grant that there is a supernatural element here and that it's not all pranks and self-hypnosis, then it seems like the only ghosts we've really seen evidence of up to this point are child ghosts. So maybe Eleanor is sort of being pushed into the role of a child by the house.
Yeah, that could be, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that leads us perfectly to what happens next, Matt, because Luke comes back from attempting to get more coffee. Hilariously, Mrs. Dudley just said, no, you don't get more coffee, actually. And he's visibly shaken. And we find out very quickly why. Someone has written on the hallway in chalk. The words go along the entire length of the hallway, and they say, "Help, Eleanor, come home." Ooh.
Spooky.
Yeah. Eleanor is understandably shaken by this, right? I think this is one of the more understandable reactions that we see her have this week. But let's step back here again. Is there a ghost actively fucking with Eleanor? Is this them? Once again, Shirley Jackson has created a thing where Luke goes off, and comes back and, oh, look, a thing has happened now. Oh,
Mhm.
did it, Luke? Well, that's convenient.
Yeah.
Didn't we get introduced to you as a liar and a cheat?
Right. I mean, it could be Eleanor's ghost mom has come to haunt her in the house, but it could also be not that, and we still don't know.
Yeah. But again, but this is really interesting because, like, the read here, and perhaps the reason why this like shakes up Eleanor a little bit more than even the others fully understand, is this idea that, like, she kind of ran away from home. She desperately tried to escape this life, and this was an outlet to escape life, and now is perhaps being called back by her ghost mom. I mean, another read is that the house is inviting Eleanor to make this her home. Come home, Eleanor. Hill House is your home now.
Yeah. That's true. I definitely noticed the sort of grammatical ambiguity of that sequence of words. So yes, it could very well be that it's not. Yeah, I had the same thought as you. Yeah.
Yeah. And here's Matt. What happens next? I can't wait to talk about this because I'm so curious what you read on is this. But Theo turns to her and says, "Maybe you wrote it yourself." And this leads to a big fight between these two women as they argue back and forth. I'm going to read this and we can talk about it. "Perhaps the spirit of the little poor companion has found means of communicating at last. Maybe she was only waiting for some drab, timid..." And then Eleanor interrupts. "Maybe it was only addressed to me because no possible appeal for help could get through that iron selfishness of yours. Maybe I might have more sympathy and understanding in one minute than..." "And maybe, of course, you wrote it yourself," Theodora says again. And this is about the point where the men step in while laughing. And we see here the reason that they're laughing is that they are convinced that Theo made Eleanor mad on purpose, said these things that knew she would anger Eleanor on purpose to make her just mad instead of afraid. And as this really clever trick that Theo did to help Eleanor, actually. Eleanor doesn't think so, though. She does. She's like, no, that's not what Theodore was doing there at all. How about you, Matt? What do you think?
No, I actually do have an opinion on this, which is not ambiguous. I think Theo was being awful and genuinely accusing Eleanor of having done this, which is weird because she can read her mind and should know whether or not she did it. But maybe she doesn't have like the ability to literally know everything that Eleanor thinks and does, right?
Maybe she just catches stray thoughts or vibes. It's not like I can read you like a book type thing.
Yeah. Another thought I had is that maybe Theo is actually jealous of Eleanor sort of being the center of attention here rather than her, because this is definitely a thing about Theodora is if everyone is paying attention to Eleanor, she or just if people aren't paying attention to her, rather she gets irritated. And here, not only is everyone else paying attention to Eleanor, but the house is paying attention to Eleanor. And presumably, if you're someone like Theodora and you're gonna go to a haunted house in the middle of nowhere for an adventure, and you show up, and then the haunted house isn't paying attention to you and is paying attention to the drab, mousy little girl over there instead, that's going to be really annoying. So that's what I think is going on with Theodora.
Yeah. I agree, generally. I think the thing that I find interesting about it is that it feels like a switch flips so fast with this, that we really, like, we saw, indications of Theo's very quick to get bored, very quick to get kind of annoyed and angry. And we've seen her, experience the different sides of Eleanor. I don't think we had felt like this kind of venom coming from her. And it just, to me, it happens so quickly to the point where it just is like, whoa.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? And maybe that's why the men have the reaction that they do, which is like, this must be some sort of ploy or joke or something, because it just comes so out of left field for us. And maybe this is like to talk back about Shirley Jackson and perhaps what she's more broadly doing here. Maybe the point here is we're talking about these like women on women crime and how women like can be really catty and terrible to each other at times, and like the men are just like, whoa, I don't know what to do here, but okay. Like I think Jackson's line here is something like, the men do what men normally do when women fight, which is just like stand off to the side and not know what to do and be silent. But they eventually step in. Just like their resolution of the problem is just, that was isn't it silly that she did that?
Right.
Not seeing actually any kind of real conflict that is building between these two women.
Yeah, it's also not clear to me that Eleanor is interpreting their actions totally accurately. Like, it could be that they were both, you imagine the two men standing to the side, like making eye contact, being like, "What the fuck?" and then one of them doing the like, "Oh, how ha 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 ha," and like sort of breaking it up on purpose by pretending to think that it's all a joke, because they just want to stop it.
Yeah,
they don't actually think it's all a joke, and then Eleanor misinterprets it because she's just socially inept. I'm not saying I think this is what was happening, because it basically, this interpretation relies on you just disbelieving Eleanor's perceptions, basically. But that was a thought that I had anyway.
I will say, just for full clarity, one thing that Luke says is like, I was really worried there for a second until I realized what Theo was doing. So like, because my original read of it is that even the idea that she has that they think that Theo is doing it on purpose is entirely coming just from her. We do get like some slight possible support for it through that line of dialogue from Luke, but again, it's kind of open to interpretation what he really meant there.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know.
I don't know.
It's just like really good though. Like it's just like it is this incredibly, again, moment of, it was a supernatural thing that happened, and then we see just like what it does is just, maybe a conflict was forming here between Eleanor and Theo, and Eleanor just hasn't seen it yet. But it's like this one thing happens, and then it's like, bam, now we're here, we're in conflict, and like Eleanor like takes this very, very personally. I don't think it's not until after the next one that Eleanor like decides, I hate this woman, I hope she dies. But like we're heading that direction very quickly.
Yeah, right. It's one thing to note that Theo sort of loses her patience here, right? Like for the first time, she's been patient. She's been irritated with Eleanor before, but she has held herself in, and now she's finally lost her patience. But the other half of this is to note that Eleanor, there's not even a moment where she's like taken aback. She just immediately returns fire in like the next breath. It's like she's been waiting for this, So yes, there has been this tension building, I think, on both sides of this relationship.
No, definitely. And from here, Matt, the book kind of goes into a montage mode very briefly as the rest of the day passes peacefully and without incident, and we move on to day 3, the morning of the third day in Hill House. Wonder, just like to ask the question from a Doyleistic perspective, like, why do this?
I don't have a really good answer for that. I the only thing I can find is like maybe the book / the house itself are lulling us into a sense of complacency. That they hit us with something scary, they hit us with drama, and then we give everyone time to settle down, take a breather, become kind of stupefied by the almost boredom of it all. I'm reminded of the fact that like the food is really good, the beds are described as being really comfortable, and so like you get comfortable, you relax, and like you kind of get used to the idea, like, there's that cold spot by the nursery, but that coffee was so good, sometimes something pounds on the door and scares you, but then you wake up the next morning after that and you feel absolutely wonderful. And so it's like hot and cold. It's like an abusive person who keeps a person under their thumb by, turning that hot cold knob so that you never know where you stand. That's kind of how I'm seeing Hill House, and perhaps Eleanor while we're at it.
Yeah, I mean, I just, for the record, I would totally stay in a haunted house if the coffee was good enough.
That's totally fair.
That. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the next morning they are talking about the fact that they kind of feel separated from the world here, that they're kind of isolated and alone, just the four of them, and they feel apart from the world. They don't even get news of the world. Eleanor says the line, "I can't picture any world but Hill House," which is a totally normal thing to say, that everyone has totally normal reactions to her saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, good. That's huh.
And then I just like to once again say that I think this book has funny parts in it. I wanted to point out this. "Unfortunately," the doctor said, and then stopped. "I beg your pardon," he went on. "I meant only to say that word will be reaching us from the outside. And of course it is not unfortunate at all. Mrs. Montague, my wife, that is, will be here on Saturday."
That's
Freudian
great.
slip there, Doctor?
Yeah, very much.
This is an interesting wrinkle. Like, another character is going to be joining the situation, possibly. What could that do to the dynamic of the four of them?
Yeah. I don't know.
I do love Luke's response is like, "Okay, but what day is Saturday? Like, what day is it today?" They've lost track of time and space and everything.
Yeah, that's great.
Everything seems to be going pretty good, Matt, until Hill House decides to strike again. Or is it Hill House? I don't know. I'm driving myself crazy. In Theodore's room, they find written in blood another message for Eleanor, as well as Theo's clothes being destroyed and stained. Theo, for her part, seems absolutely convinced that Eleanor did this. And Eleanor finds herself, quote, "not quite coherent at this moment," which is putting it mildly, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, I think it's entirely understandable that Theo would start to suspect Eleanor at this point, like for some of the same reasons that we are suspecting other characters, where it's like, okay, you kind of had the means and the opportunity, and in this particular case, starting to seem like you had the motive too.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't think we've said this yet in this conversation, but it's possible that Theo is right. It's possible that Eleanor did do the chalk, and it's possible that Eleanor did do this. And we're just not seeing it because, madness might imply a schism where Eleanor's not really aware of what she's doing.
Yeah.
She's hiding it from herself. And we're just not seeing not seeing it. But again, if we're granting, if we're also continuing to keep open the possibility that there's something supernatural happening and that the house is evil, well, if I was an evil house and I wanted people to go crazy and kill each other, then I would do stuff like this, where I'm creating situations where they would plausibly think that it was the woman that they hate who did that thing, and thus, continue to stoke that resentment, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. But what happens here is, while Theo is crying and blaming Eleanor, little Nell has decided, this is what we were talking about earlier, that she absolutely despises Theo. Quote, "without trying to find a reason, that she had never felt such uncontrollable loathing for any person before. She thinks that she hates her. She imagines herself physically assaulting her and thinking that she would like to watch her die." So Theo can hear the stuff, right? Like, maybe,
yeah, at least maybe, and maybe probably. We don't know the rules of Theo's telepathy, but especially if she's just like since we're in Eleanor's head, we don't really know what this looks like, but I'm just sort of imagining Eleanor just like staring at her with just like Kubrick stare madness in her eyes for like 15 minutes, such that like even a totally non-psychic person would be like, I think she wants to kill me. I'm pretty sure she wants to kill me.
I'm just imagining Theo catching, "I would like to watch her die," in her thoughts, and then also hearing, "Yes, she'll have to live in your room with you for the rest of your stay here."
Amazing. Yeah. No, like I part of me wonders if like the first, concept of this as a straightforward haunted house mystery is like from the perspective of Theo. And then the author realizes that it's way more fun if it's from the perspective of the creepy, unsettling side character, actually.
Yeah. Related, we have to talk about this that happens in the drawing room a little bit later. They're talking about fear, and Eleanor is talking about fear, and she says, "When I am afraid, I can see perfectly the sensible, beautiful, not afraid side of the world. I can see chairs and tables and windows staying the same, not affected in the least, and I can see things like the carefully woven texture of the carpet not even moving. But when I am afraid, I no longer exist in any relation to these things, I suppose because things are not afraid. I think we are only afraid of ourselves," the doctor said slowly. "No," Luke said, "of seeing ourselves clearly and without disguise. Of knowing what we really want," Theodora said. She pressed her cheek against Eleanor's hand, and Eleanor, hating the touch of her, took her hand away quickly. So here's the interesting thing that I find of this passage, and the ways in which I am so eternally conflicted about Eleanor. I think what she says is super insightful and fascinating, actually. This idea that when you're afraid, like when you're living in the state of fear, it's like fascinating to like look around. Like, I don't know if you ever do something similar where like, I don't know, have you ever like, you're having like a really bad day at work, or you're really like stressed and anxious about stuff, and you just start like looking around and seeing the world as it is and just being like, none of none of the things out there are as stressed and anxious as I am. Another example of this is like when I don't want to go to work and I like see people post on social media that they're going on vacation. I'm just like, fuck. I want to be on vacation. But just like like it's not exactly what we're talking about here, but because she's talking about the specific things in the room, but just this idea that you're existing in a state of mind that is just slightly askew and slightly out of alignment with the world itself. And I think that's like a profound way of describing like living with a certain emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever done exactly the sort of mental move that you're describing, but it does remind me of just like the advice to people who are having an anxiety attack is like ground yourself in your senses, the feeling of the chair under you, the sight of the things around you, the sounds that you're hearing in the room that you happen to be sitting in. These are a very potent immediate antidote to feelings of anxiety, which anxiety is fear. Really, it's a kind of fear. Yeah. They're overlapping. So I think there is something salient here about, you know, what Eleanor is articulating, where it's like when you're really afraid, you feel, you know, disjoint, that you, I love the phrasing, I no longer exist in any relation to these things. Yeah. It's just this disconnection from that world, because the world is not afraid and I am, and thus we're different. We're two different things, and it makes you feel even worse, I think.
Yeah. And I can't help but think all the other characters' response to what Eleanor has said there is kind of lame.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's reflecting like what's happening here is these people are reflecting their own personal feeling.
Right.
But like, I think we are only afraid of ourselves, the doctor said. And Luke says no, of seeing ourselves clearly. And Eleanor says, or Theodora says no, of knowing what we really want.
While making a physical overture toward Eleanor, which we will mention again shortly.
Yeah. More evidence towards. I by the way, a small correction. I'm sure we're gonna get emails on this. I don't know with 100% certainty if it is ever specifically said that Theodora's roommate is a woman.
Right.
Like, I don't think it ever specifically says that. I think I made the assumption of that because of I both know about the queer read of the character, and it just felt like that way to me before. But there is a read that's just a man and they're unmarried living together, which also is semi-scandalous in the 1950s. But I still think I still like the queer reading of the character.
I feel like there's no way you would use the word roommate to describe your live-in boyfriend. Like, that's
sure
just not the word you would use for that. And yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty sold on the interpretation that you said. So
yeah, but anyway, I mean, I go back to like one of the metaphors I'm trying to construct of one of the potential reads of this book, and I think there are infinity reads of this book, and that's one of the reasons why I like it. But it's this idea that Eleanor is this person that is different and apart from other people, and that she's not a normal person, and part of the world rejecting her is this pushback against people that are different and don't, you know, aren't contained within the norm. And so I see things like this kind of profound statement on fear and how it makes her feel, and everyone's just like, I think I'm afraid of me.
yeah,
It's like the most boring kind of trite like description of what fear means to you as compared to her beautiful flowery example of it.
Yeah. Now the Eleanor continues to be very relatable to 15 to 17-year-old Matt. Where like I distinctly remember moments when I would say something where I was like, I'm expressing a very vulnerable, earnest thought that I've never seen reflected anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people will be like, yeah, everybody feels that way, idiot. And not literally, but you just feel like you're not even listening. You're not even listening to me. You're assuming that what I said is this other simpler thing that you saw in a movie, but that's not what I was saying, because you didn't listen, because you're an asshole. Like this is very much the vibe that I get from Eleanor.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I also like this from her. She says right after the other statement, look, there is only one of me, and it's all I've got. I hate seeing myself dissolve and slip and separate so that I'm living in one half, my mind, and I see the other half of me helpless and frantic and driven, and I can't stop it. But I know I'm not really going to be hurt, and yet time is so long, and even a second goes on, and I could stand any of it if I could only surrender. Surrender, said the doctor sharply, and Eleanor stared. Surrender, Luke repeated. I love this.
Yeah. Are we talking about surrendering to the house, or
yeah? I mean,
maybe
surrender to what, Eleanor? Yeah.
It's great, and I also love the sort of ungrammatical run-on sentence that nonetheless you follow exactly what she means.
Yeah, and this feeling of like a person who, I've used the word multiple times tonight, but is like kind of unmoored. It like that like and on some level knows she is like this idea of, I think sometimes whether it be depression or manic, like this idea that I am fully aware and observing that my behaviors are like wrong and making things difficult and bad, but like I can't help it. I'm kind of watching that. Like the similar, I think, she's describing her fear as this thing that like leaves her disconnected and kind of misaligned with the rest of the world. But perhaps like even outside of fear, or maybe she's lived in fear for so long, that is just her natural state of a feeling, that she feels like this person that is watching the two part, like watching the other part of her, the one that's acting and making choices and has this self-doubt and self-hatred and turns everything that people do to her bad, and she knows that's awful and terrible, but she can't stop it. She's powerless to stop it.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, and maybe it would be so much easier if she could just stop living as this one person observing the other person do that and just allow herself to just fully become that other person, which would, I mean, in theory, completely destroy who Eleanor is.
But that's the allure. Maybe that's the surrendering she's talking about, to sort of not have to exist anymore, which is connected to this idea that there's a suicide in this house, where it's like surrender to the allure of not existing anymore is a way of connecting to the idea of surrendering to self-destruction.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so Matt, our chapter ends with later that night, Eleanor wakes up in the night to absolute darkness as she clutches Theo's hands. She hears voices and talking and laughing and the cry of a child. And finally, she yells, "Stop it!" when suddenly the lights come back on and she realizes that the hand she has been holding was definitely not Theo's.
Oh dear. This is terrifying. this is terrifying in a whole different way than than the other part with the ghosts, because number one, you don't know if any of it is real or
Sure.
Like, is this a spiritual phenomenon that she's experienced, or is this just a hallucination? But almost like either way, it's terrifying because you feel her fear. Like you believe that she's terrified regardless of the reality of it. The idea of being like, frozen there and just hearing these sounds, and it kind of it sounds like a sleep paralysis dream, really.
Sure.
So, but you can be utterly terrified during a sleep paralysis dream. So it's not like that's like, anyway, I don't know. Yet again, scary, very scary, inconclusive whether anything is actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, this could very easily be explained away as just it was in Eleanor's mind. She just thought she was holding a hand. She was not.
Right.
Maybe it was like interesting thing about the scene is there's never a point where like Theo is like, "I wasn't holding your hand." It's just Eleanor that realizes, "Oh God, whose hand was I holding?"
Yeah, doesn't this scene just kind of end abruptly in a way that leaves you not sure? Like, well, okay, and then what happened? Yeah. Okay.
Well, what happens next, Matt, is we move on to chapter 6 when it's the next morning and Eleanor is sitting with Luke as she says she's learning the pathways of the heart and is suddenly deciding she's going to hit on Luke here. Uh-huh. This is such a non sequitur that you're just like, what the fuck? What? We went from holding ghost hand in bed to, I guess I'm going to see if I want to fall in love with Luke now. Uh-huh. Like, this is like the scene itself. Like, I think that as the scene operates, like, it makes sense. Like, she's like, part of her experiencing all these things in new life is like, there's a man. I've never talked with a man before. I'm going to try to talk with a man and see if I can like figure out what this love thing is all about. But it, like, the way it's positioned in the book and the thing it immediately follows is so different that you are like taken aback for a second and like, did I miss a chapter? Did pages get stuck together?
Right. Genuinely was, I was like, let me rewind a bit because I feel like I might have, because sometimes it plays when I'm not listening maybe, and no, I didn't miss anything. Wild.
Yeah. So yeah, Luke and Eleanor are sitting outside. Eleanor, kind of clumsily talks to Luke about getting to know him better, trying to get him to tell her something about himself. He responds with, "I never had a mother," which to Eleanor is the worst possible thing he could say. She's trying to navigate like love and attraction and relationships and connections. And the thing he says to her is like, "Let me tell you about my mom issues."
Yeah.
I just want to like pause here and say like how much I enjoy the writing of this section, even as it like kind of flabbergasted me the first time I got to it, because like, what are we doing here? But like, it seems so like Eleanor is so neurotic and for lack of a better term, insane here, right? Like, just like she's going a mile a minute, and like everything he says, she's like, "What does this mean? What does that mean? What if he answers this way? It'll mean this. If he answers this way, it'll mean this." If it like, again, to go back to what we were talking about, it's a very relatable thing of like young relationships and love and trying to navigate it, and everything is a signal or a sign and means something, and this means he definitely doesn't like me, but this means he definitely does like me. And it's just like it's like, again, like Eleanor has never talked with a man before in her life, like one-on-one with a man ever and it just like very she's a child. She really is.
Once again, you imagine what this is like from the outside, where Luke is like sort of half paying attention, kind of maybe just kind of vaguely trying to find some common ground with this woman who is in the house with him, maybe half interested in like she hitting on me, and then she's just sitting there like the Marge Simpson thing where she's sitting, but then if you look at her from the side, there's no chair under her because she's just like totally rigid with tension, staring at him without blinking, and like we it's entirely possible that he is like macking on her, but I don't think so. Like I think she's, like you said a second ago, just like neurotically reading into all these tiny things in ways that are not present.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of like projection, and then there's a lot of like what I think of as like self-protective distancing, where it's like, well, fine, fuck him. I don't need him. I hate him, actually. He sucks. He's the worst man I've ever seen, and he sucks.
Oh God, he's so boring.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he's the worst. Yeah.
Right. And it's like,
I'm done with him.
And it's because she didn't get this. She didn't get what she wanted. And
yeah. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating that like I can't get over how this just plopped, like Shirley Jackson just plopped this in right here. And I mean, this only leads to the we haven't quite got it to yet, but then the Theo scene where Theo's like suddenly furious with her for what exactly?
Right.
Who knows? Like we're approaching the end of the book. We haven't quite gotten to the climax yet, but like we're approaching the end of the book, and it's definitely like the way the book is picking up, as it were, is not necessarily the actual events that are happening, but the rate at which it seems like Eleanor is becoming more and more disconnected from reality, because the connecting tissue between the things that are happening is making less and less sense for us. Like, wait, Theo's mad at her now? Well, for hitting on Luke? Really? Why?
Yeah.
Wait, what? Really? Are you sure?
Yeah. We're just missing time. Yeah.
But before we get to that, though, we do have to talk about Luke and his book. Mm-hmm. So Luke is exploring the library, and he finds a book in the library titled Memories for Sophia Ann Lester Crane, a legacy for her education and enlightenment during her lifetime, from her affectionate and devoted father, Hugh Desmond Lester Crane, 21st June, 1881. Every book I write for my children is going to be just like that. Exactly.
Yeah. With that kind of title, with your full name and the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also am going to put a bunch of creepy pictures in it and scare the shit out of my kids, because that's what's fun, right?
Yeah, I like to show my young children Blake paintings for sure. That's normal thing.
Yeah. So what this is a scrapbook of kind with pictures and passages ripped out of other books, which, by the way, that may, like, anything else aside, that makes Hugh Crane a monster, that he just like took a book and just is like, oh, here, I'll just rip this page out of it and stick it in my stupid scrapbook.
Yeah, this is the worst thing we've ever heard of him doing so far.
Yep. The first painting we see here, Matt, is a Goya. I think one interesting thing, and I say this is true kind of across the board, we mention artists several times. We don't ever actually mention the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is similar to our discussion of the statue that is seen in the drawing room, is that we get no actual explanations of what these pictures look like. We know Goya, right? Like, we know the artist Goya. We know some of the work Goya did. I think most famously it was like Saturn eating his son is the one, right? That could be the picture that was here.
Uh-huh.
I appreciate the irony of like putting that in and then having the caption say "Honor thy father and mother." That's like really funny to me.
Yeah.
But we're not told it's that painting in particular. So, and that continues for every single one of them, right?
Yeah. No, I think no, you're perfectly right to bring up the sculptures, because we get a vibe, but we don't get a picture. So we're just left unsettled. We're left to imagine what it might be.
Yeah. So it's like next we get a snake pit in which Hugh's daughter is told to reject sin and hold herself apart from the rest of the world. Next is hell, which we're told is an illustration from John Fox's Book of Martyrs. Again, what does the illustration look like? I don't know. You look up John Fox's Book of Martyrs and you see people being burned which I think that's roughly what they gesture to, but we don't actually get to see what it looks like. And then Heaven is a painting from William Blake. Again, we're not told what painting. Blake did quite a lot of paintings, right? I found one that I put in the script of The Stairway to Heaven from William Blake, but
yeah,
no clear image of any of this stuff.
That is the least upsetting of the Blake paintings that I've seen, by the way. So it's probably
so maybe
not
it
that
is.
one.
I mean, yeah, probably not. Yeah. Then Crane goes through all the 7 deadly sins, each with a picture of their own drawn by him. Nice little work of him.
That's great. I love that.
And Luke teases that Pride looks like Eleanor. Which does echo that moment that we mentioned earlier where the 3 of them kind of tease Eleanor about how she always has to be the center of attention and she's so vain and what are we doing here, Matt?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and like part of you is like, okay, it's just a joke. But also, I think we've all known that one person who their thing is that they constantly and conspicuously pigeonhole themselves as like the awkward loser in the situation.
Sure.
And this is actually a strategy for drawing attention to yourself. Like, it's entirely possible to think of yourself as the wallflower while simultaneously sucking all of the attention of the room toward yourself. Like it's a very annoying personality type, honestly. And it wasn't really it's not really how I perceive Eleanor, honestly, but like I'm open to the idea that maybe Luke, for example, specifically like sees her as kind of like manipulating the social context in ways where it's like, you know, you're I don't know what the right expression is for this, but do you know what I'm talking about? Like, you know, the vibe.
Yeah, I totally get that vibe, and I agree with you. Like, I don't think Eleanor is consciously trying to do that, but maybe that is how she's being perceived. I mean, there is, to me, I'm forced to read like some truth to the idea that they keep bringing this stuff up, even in jest. Like, it just seems like, especially Luke, where like I don't believe any other character would do this, but Luke, but make this incredibly inappropriate joke against a person that they probably already have had maybe side conversations about. It's like, hey, Eleanor is not. She's not doing too good, actually. And like, I can imagine just Montague taking Luke aside and being like, what the fuck was that, dude? She's already hanging on by a thread, and you're doing stuff like, oh, look, he drew you in his 7 Deadly Sins scary murder book, Eleanor.
It's a fun thought. I enjoy
that. So the book itself, though, Matt, ends with Crane sending a final message to his daughter in his own blood. So that's cool.
I feel really bad for these daughters of his. This is my main reaction here. Yeah. He definitely at this point feels much worse to me than just like, oh man, built a weird house and kind of kooky. It's like, no man, he wrote a book for his daughters in blood. That's way weirder than the house, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of this is. I was thinking about Severance and the Keir and like how he's sort of like making this cult of personality around himself, with the house and the book and the like the weird off kilter, like it's the sort of dark Christianity vibe as maybe Stephen King would call it. It's very it's very dark, and I don't know where this goes. Like, again, if there's something supernatural happening, this is a fantastic framing for it. But if there's not, I'm not really sure what role this serves. But then again, if we don't find out, I don't know. I'm so confused, honestly. But I'm confused in a fun and exciting way. So that's fine.
Well, I think we could, at the very least, say that perhaps a place in which children were raised by a very oppressive and awful parental figure is something that Eleanor can relate and find some kinship with.
That's a fantastic point, and that might be why the the ghost girls want to talk to her. Although the girls died when they were older. I keep forgetting this, by the way.
Yeah.
I keep thinking like, oh, Crane and his daughters, and thinking of the daughters as children. But the daughters died when they were like old women, basically.
Correct.
So that just kind of loops me back into being confused. But perhaps a place can be haunted by what happened there without necessarily having to be haunted by the ghosts, right?
Yeah. All right, next, what happens is Theo decides to pick a fight with Eleanor, asking her if Luke will come join her at our little apartment with her blue cup. Again, like, this seems to come out of nowhere, where we're forced to go like, huh?
Yeah.
Is Theo jealous? Does Theo, like, is she mad because Theo likes Luke? Like, there's been moments of, like, where you could maybe argue, like, Theo and Luke are kind of flirting maybe a little bit, or maybe not. Maybe that's just Eleanor's read, or just does Theo like Eleanor? I think like the one clearest read to me is that Theo and the rest of them see little Nell, as you put, like that's why they're kind of calling her the kind of diminutive Nell, sees her as this incredibly naive, unexperienced person who is now trying to get herself in a situation with what she calls a rogue, a liar, a cheat, someone who's probably pretty experienced in this kind of stuff, that is Luke, and sees that and thinks, oh, this is bad. This is bad for you. But what other emotions are surrounding that? Very unclear.
Yeah. My first thought was that Theo likes Luke and is jealous. And then later I thought, oh no, Theo likes Eleanor and is jealous of the fact that Eleanor is paying attention to someone else and maybe feels kind of toyed with. And then I get real wrapped around the axle because I'm like, does Eleanor also know that Theodora likes her and she maybe reciprocates and she maybe is actually doing it on purpose? Because she kind of seems to be aware that Theodora is into her, but maybe is in such deep denial of this that she can't even confront it. Like, one interpretation of the scene where she paints her nails, where Theodora paints her toenails, is like, this is flirtation. This is not girls being girls. This is a romantic moment or a moment of ambiguous connotation that Theodora maybe wants to be romantic, and maybe Eleanor kind of wants to be romantic, but also that's a terrifying thought to her because, and then she, when something in her mind goes slightly wrong, she immediately like snaps and is like, oh, dirty, sinful, evil. And it's like, and she's not reacting to the toes being painted. She's reacting to the, feelings that she was just having toward Theodora, actually.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's so repressed that there's like one little crack in the facade that gets through, and it gets through in like the next page of our notes, basically, that for me sort of recontextualized everything. Like, I'm glad that we got to that point, by the way, in this week's reading, so that I could have that in my head when I went back through everything and was like, okay, that sheds a different light on everything that happened and the dynamic between these two women. And we'll get there in a second, but
sure. I mean, one thing that I think I didn't specifically point out in the notes, but like Eleanor's constant refrain throughout, like all of Theodora's chastising language here is, I'm a fool, I'm a fool, I'm a fool. And like, again, what do you mean, Eleanor? What do you mean by that? Like, how are you a fool? Are you a fool talking to Luke and you see some truth into what Theodore is saying to you? Are you a fool for not realizing how Theodore feels about you and how you feel about her? Are you a fool for even thinking you could relate to these people and be friends with these people? And are you a fool for coming to Hill House? Like, none of that is offered. She just repeats this refrain, I'm a fool. And what do we do with that?
I don't know.
But Eleanor flees from the conversation, and Theo catches up with her. I love the quote here is fear and guilt are sisters, which I love that. Theo says she tells Theo she has no business being in her affairs, and why does she care anyway? And Theo again answers really cryptically. She basically says, "You're right, I don't care. Like, yeah, why would I possibly care?" Again, like it's so charged. I feel like part of what I'm worried of doing is that I've made like the kind of evidence bias, when the police like decide this guy's the perpetrator, that every piece of evidence they see just corroborates that because they're ignoring the pieces of evidence that don't. I'm worried that's happening with me and like my read of Theodora being queer. It's like every bit of the conversation I'm seeing the charged parts where like the unwritten attraction is there, and I don't know whether that's right or not. But I see it everywhere.
I think it's one of those things where once that interpretation occurs to you, you're like, oh, suddenly a lot of things that seemed confusing no longer seem confusing.
Sure.
And also there's the line that we're going to get to in a minute that to me, I was just like, I see.
Okay, let's get to that.
Yeah.
So as they're walking, we get this. Nothing irrevocable had yet been spoken. So basically their friendship, or whatever you want to call it, is hanging on by a thread, but nothing that they can't take back later has been spoken yet. But there was only the barest margin of safety left them. I just want to point out these people met each other 3 days ago.
Yeah, and they've also said a lot of pretty mean shit to each other too.
Yeah. Each of them moving delicately along the outskirts of an open question, and once spoken, such a question as, "Do you love me?" could never be answered or forgotten. So like there's a read here that the "Do you love me" is just like an example that Shirley Jackson is like, here's an example of a type of question like this. But that has nothing to do with this relationship. Okay, that's absurd. Like as I'm saying that, like it's an absurd argument. You don't use "Do you love me" here
if you don't mean it.
If you don't want to draw people's attention towards a certain thing.
Right. Yes. Exactly. That's just a really interesting sentence / paragraph. I guess it's the sentence. Mm-hmm. It's a long sentence with a lot of different punctuation marks in it. The one part of it that's interesting to me is the last clause, could never be answered or forgotten. I get that it could never be forgotten because once a thing like that is said, it's like, okay, now I know that you think that, or that you were wondering that. Okay, so you can't take it back. I get it. It's irrevocable in the sense that you have crushed the ambiguity. In a book that's all about ambiguity, to ask a question like that is to make a decision point. This is going to go one way or it's going to go the other. There can no longer be this sustained ambiguity. What I'm not sure about is why it says it could never be answered or forgotten. It's like, why couldn't it be answered? Is it? I don't really have an idea here.
Because it's unanswerable. It's too complicated.
Okay.
What is going on between these two characters? And if we ask the question outright, if Theodora turns to Eleanor, Eleanor turns to Theodora and says, "What's going on between us?" Can either of them answer that question? Really? I don't know.
No.
What's happening in this house? What's happening right now? What is this? What does it mean?
This is a great point. I love this, actually. I've gotten in arguments with people who think that like the problem with dating is that people don't communicate all of their intentions right up front, immediately and unambiguously. And I'm like, what you're proposing is to kill the very idea of romance itself.
Does any person do that? I don't believe any person actually.
Yes, I know people who behave this way, and
it's awful.
And and I'm like, like it's the dance, it's the plausible deniability of the dance of approach, and the tension of that is the fun part of falling in love. And you're totally right that if you just ask that question in the middle of that process, then you're like, well, nothing now. you just ruined it. No, I love that. I love that as an answer. That's fantastic.
I want. I can't wait to get into what happens at the end of this chapter then with this in mind. So what happens next is the two continue to walk side by side in silence, unsure. They're holding hands, unsure of what to do. They can't ask the question. They're circling around it. It's unknowable, unanswerable, and eventually, as they do this, the path changes. The trees turn white and transparent. The ground kind of goes into this like ghost world of blacks and whites. That they're kind of completely overwhelmed by what is happening in front of them.
Is this really happening?
I just remembered that our audio listeners can't see me. So what I did there, listeners, is I gave a big old shrug.
Yeah. Anyway, it's great. It's much harder to wave away as a hoax perpetrated by the doctor. It's the most overtly supernatural. I mean, I've almost just been bracketing this off to the side for this whole conversation where we're talking about, like, is something supernatural happening? Because this very last bit, like the very, very last bit of the chapter, is just so clearly like, yes, there is. But
yeah.
But then I don't know how it fits, right? And because it's the last thing that happens, I'm like, well, I want to see what happens next. I want to see how this is contextualized.
Sure. Yeah. So let's read this last little bit as they follow the path, which eventually leads to a picnic in the garden. They could hear the laughter of the children and the affectionate, amused voices of the mother and father. The grass was richly, thickly green. The flowers were colored red and orange and yellow. The sky was blue and gold. And one child wore a scarlet jumper and raised its voice again in laughter, tumbling after a puppy over the grass. There was a checked tablecloth spread out and smiling. The mother leaned over to take up a plate of bright fruit. Then Theodora screamed. "Don't look back," she cried out in a voice high with fear. "Don't look back. Don't look. Run." We never get to see what she saw that made her scream and run. It's not something they're looking at in front of them at the picnic. It's something behind them, because they run through where the picnic is supposed to be, thinking they're going to stample over the tablecloth and the picnic basket and the people, but of course run across nothing because none of it's really there.
Yeah.
But we never get to learn what Theodora saw that made her scream and run. But this scene, Matt, this is so to kind of talk back what we were talking about here, about the idea of this is an idealized version of life, what we're seeing right here. A very traditional nuclear idealized version of life, right? Father, mother, child, dog, picnic, rich, beautiful grass, colorful flowers, fun. This is, if you want to like close your eyes and imagine what a nuclear family perfect day was, perhaps in the 50s, like, it doesn't get far off of this, right? And in the middle of this image, this perfect image, Theodore screams and they have to run away from it.
Yeah,
because it's not available to either of them, whether it's because they're queer or because they're like not neurotypical, like for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is not a pathway that's available to either of these women.
Yeah. I mean, in the case of Eleanor, I'll just say, like, it's possible that she's not neurotypical, but it's also possible that she's just lived a really, really unlucky life and has been shaped into who she is. Like,
right.
So,
and there's a constant pressure, for I mean, women and men, just people in general, of aligning themselves and like, this is the dream, this is the goal, this is the thing that you're supposed to want, the thing that you're supposed to strive for. And for whatever reason, either it eludes you or you don't feel like you want it, and that makes you feel abnormal. There's a lot of this here, right? There's a lot of this, I can't get over that idea, like the fact that we don't get to see what scared Theodora, but this is the scene of domestic normalcy.
Yeah. And just like sort of ground things in the plot questions. Like this didn't immediately strike me as being like obviously the Crane family or anything like that. Like I mean, maybe it was, but I didn't see any signifiers that would tell me that it was supposed to be. So it's kind of like you said. I emphasize that it is not clearly the Crane family to point out, like, yeah, I mean, if it's anything, it is more of a symbolic representation of idyllic family, two parents, one child, etc. Or was it? I was actually unclear whether there were two children or one child. There's one child explicitly.
It says the laughter of the children, so I don't know. Yeah. And anyway. One child. Yeah. I mean, we don't even get to see what what gender the kids are, right? Like, one child wore a scarlet jumper and raised its voice again. So, like, I think if the book wanted you to think it was the Crane family, like, obviously Shirley Jackson could have made that very, very clear. I think in my mind, it was always supposed to represent something more broad and general. I mean, like, refusing to gender the children and even, like, point to any details at all, except for the scarlet jumper it raises. It wears. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so the chapter ends with the two of them rushing back to Hill House, and the others being like, "We were looking for you. Where were you? You've been gone for hours." And that's where our chapter ends.
And they were not gone for hours.
I mean, they didn't feel like time like that had passed.
Right.
It could have.
Yeah.
Again, things are becoming unclear. The passage of time is slipping. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. So that is chapters 4 through 6. So, Matt, we've only got 3 to go. We've got about 56 pages left in the book. So next week, we're going to wrap up with the end of Hill House. We're going to finish the book and talk about that.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Before we go, we do have a discussion question. This one will be coming out on our overview episode. So 2 weeks from this release date will be our overview episode where we look back at the book as a whole. It's going to be kind of a weird episode because normally we read books much slower than in just 3 episodes, but I still wanted to have the overview episode because I do think it gives us an opportunity to have one fun final talk about the whole book. So we're still going to do that. And on that episode, we're also going to ask what, Matt? What are we going to ask?
We're going to ask, what is your favorite depiction of insanity?
Now, I want to be here. We're not saying that Eleanor is insane, right?
Scott's making a face, which you're going to have to watch on YouTube to see.
So just interpret that any way you want.
Yeah, right. And, in terms of why it's your favorite, obviously we want to hear why it's your favorite depiction. It could be, your favorite because it's the most accurate, or your favorite because it's the most florid and entertaining.
There you go.
However you want to take it, really.
I like it. All right. So, yeah, that is it for us this week. Next week, the Hill House will be haunted. Maybe.
Yeah. Haunted by some people who are awful to each other.
I don't know about you, but I'm really excited for Montague's wife to show up.
Yes. I'm excited. I don't know. Can't wait to finish this. All right.
Great.
Remember, you can reach us at email on flanaganswakepod@gmail.com, over on X at flanaganswake19, at Doof Media on Instagram, on Blue Sky at flanaganswakepod, and of course the subreddit at reddit.com/r/Doof Media is a great place to not only answer the discussion question, but also just participate in other conversations that are happening about, the various shows that we do over on the Doofcast. We wrapped up our coverage of the 10 Oscar nominees from last year a little bit belatedly because it took a while for that last film to actually be available. But we did put a bow on it, and we gave our final tier list of all the movies that came out, all the Oscar movies. So see discussion of all that stuff over on the subreddit. And remember, you can and should watch this episode on YouTube and all the other episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, make sure you check out our merch store, doofmedia.myshopify.com. There's new merch there on occasion as we come up with new. If you have any ideas for how to make, so here, for those that haven't been listening during Kingslingers, what happened was there's a line in Stephen King's Wizard and Glass, where a character says to another character, "If you love me, then love me." And we decided to say the phrase, "If you podcast me, then podcast me." And people thought it was funny, and so we put it on a mug. And it's our best-selling mug ever because it's hilarious. If you have any ideas of stupid stuff we've said that you want on a mug, please email us at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com. And we will see if we can make some stupid merch with dumb inside jokes on it, which is my favorite kind of merch.
Yeah, me too.
But that is doofmedia.myshopify.com to see the stupid merch that's available right this very minute.
Yeah, it's great. Also, if you like our shows and you want to support us, then please consider heading on over to Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. I already kind of mentioned the cool stuff you get at the top of the episode, but just reminding you, if you said to yourself, "Oh, yeah, I'll do that," and then you forgot, here's your friendly reminder to do that now.
Yep. But of course, we understand if you cannot afford to join us on Patreon right now. It's a very volatile time. I completely understand. Fortunately for you, there's a ton of ways to help us out if you don't have any money to spare. You can share the podcast. Please, please, please keep sharing it through the socials and through your friend groups and anyone. People are finding our show every day, and that's because of you guys. So please keep that up. You can also send us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on things like that have those kind of reviews. You can send those in as well. We try to read those as they come in on the show. So this week's review comes from Hoot, who gives us 5 stars and says, "So happy. I'm just so glad they kept going after the Kingslingers pod. If you don't know what that is, please use your search bar and listen from the beginning. I'm ready for more in-depth info, banter, and overall entertainment. Let's go." Well, thank you, Hoot. I agree. Go listen to Kingslingers, but only after catching up on Flanagan's Wake, because we're doing some really great stuff over here right now.
Yeah, and you want to be caught up.
Yeah, of course you do. Social pressure. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Do it. Do it. I debated saying it again or not, and I went for it.
Oh, that's good.
I think I was one time too many. Actually, I've ruined it all. All right, folks. We will see you back here next week for the conclusion of The Haunting of Hill House. Until then, do it.
Oh. But see, by doing it that one last time, it crossed the line into being like genuinely uncomfortable, which made it way funnier.
Good. I'm glad.